Hi, Mystery Knox listeners. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Kim.
And I'm Mary.
And today's case is going to be a little bit different. Today we don't just have one case for you, but two. Two eerily similar stories about two women found dead and the possibility of their killers going free until something incredible happened. Oh, and by the way, these two cases happened 80 years apart. These are the cases of Teresita Basa and Zona Hester Shue, otherwise known as the Greenbrier ghost. Also, just a disclaimer, there is talk of murder and sexual assault in today's episode. Listener discretion is advised. Okay, well, I got my coffee. What about you?
Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Got some of my snacks.
Yeah.
Got some quick snack here.
Quick snack? What snack did you get?
Just pepperoni, string cheese, and olives.
Ooh, sounds good.
But yeah, I got my coffee as well. Stopped by Dunkin'. Can we say Dunkin'? I mean, they're not sponsoring us.
Pretty sure we can.
Got my pumpkin spice.
Yeah, by the way, people, if you like pumpkin, Dunkin' has their pumpkin spice out. So go get it.
Dunkin'.
Hey,
has
Dunkin',
their pumpkin.
come sponsor us. No,
They're like, we haven't heard this one before.
Right? No, a couple days ago, Tyler and I got our pumpkin spice lattes and our pumpkin muffins, and it was delicious.
Ugh. You guys make me sick.
What?
With jealousy.
So, Mary, I just wanted to give a shout out to our listeners. You know, we have our listeners in the U.S., Panama, and Germany. But also, I just realized that we got some new listeners. Do you want to know where they're from?
Yeah.
Ireland and Japan.
No way.
Yeah. So we just wanted to say hello to everybody.
Like, how did you find this? The people that listen to us, how did you find us?
There you go. Mary wants to know, how did you stumble upon our podcast? We would love to know. Teresita Basa was born in 1929 in the Philippines. According to reports, she lived a life that some would say was privileged. She was an only child to a very successful lawyer and his wife. Teresita graduated from Assumption College in Manila, which is a private Roman Catholic school just for girls. After graduation, she decided to move to the United States and ended up going to Indiana University. She eventually received a master's degree in music from there, but she also studied inhalation therapy as well. Eventually, Teresita ended up living in Chicago, Illinois, and got a job at Edgewater Hospital, where she worked as a respiratory therapist.
But question, I mean, this may be off topic, but what is inhalation therapy?
I don't know if people would want to know this, but I'm going to give it to you anyway.
Yeah, because when it comes to, like, medical stuff, I'm just like, I don't even...
The preferred modern treatment of respiratory diseases is with inhalation therapy, where the medicine is not taken as a tablet or liquid by mouth, but is breathed in or inhaled. Relief is felt from where the disease originates, the lungs. This type of therapy is also known as local or topical therapy. Now, according to multiple reports, Teresita was a very nice, polite, quiet person. She lived by herself in her apartment and didn't have any known enemies. She was a hard worker, loved her job, and she provided wonderful care to her patients, which I think makes what happened to her all the more shocking. Unfortunately, February 21st, 1977 would be the last night of Teresita's life. That night was an ordinary night like every night before. Teresita was home alone, and she chatted on the phone to a friend at around 7:30 p.m. Teresita happened to mention she had a male guest coming over, but she never identified him to her friend. This would be the last time she ever spoke to her friend.
No, but it is weird, though. I mean, why would you not say who?
I thought the same thing when I was reading that, because, you know, even when we were living together, if I would go out or if I had someone coming over, I would always tell Mary, like, you know, this person is coming over. I would say their name. I wouldn't just be like, oh, I have a male guest coming over. It's just very weird to me.
If the person said to the authorities, oh yeah, she had a male guest coming over, and we don't know the name. Like, that person could have been the person, you know? And they're just saying,
right,
we don't know who it was, just to throw off the scent or something.
True, that is true. But yeah, I just found that very odd too. Like, again, it also could have been the time. I mean, it was the 70s. Yeah. Maybe it was like a culture thing. She was from the Philippines. I don't know. But unfortunately, it would have helped if she would have said the name. And on this topic, I just think it would be a good time to remind everybody, male or female, that if you have someone coming over and you're home alone, just let someone know. Let someone know that this person's coming over, or if you're going somewhere, let somebody know where you're going, who's going to be there, you know. Just cover your butt is all I'm saying. So around an hour later, neighbors started to smell smoke coming from Teresita's apartment. They notified the maintenance man and he called for assistance. Fire trucks responded to the call and headed to Teresita's apartment. Even they would be in disbelief by what they were about to find. Once they arrived, firefighters rushed inside apartment 15B. As they were putting out the fire, firefighters were shocked to discover a dead body under the burning mattress. The body was female, nude, burned, and had a butcher's knife still embedded in the chest area. The way the body was positioned also made it look like the victim had been raped, with the victim's clothing folded neatly by her body. Eventually, the victim was identified as Teresita Basa.
Did they find any evidence at the crime scene?
So, according to the medical examiner, there was no evidence of sexual assault as previously thought. As for the evidence, there wasn't much of any according to multiple sources that I was able to find. So, I unfortunately could not find anything about them finding any fingerprints or any DNA, any hair fibers, anything like that. Couldn't find anything on it, which I thought was kind of weird.
Did they have that kind of technology, though, back then?
That was 1977, so yeah. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't obviously as widely used as it is now, but they knew to collect.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. I couldn't find anything about it, so I don't know if they... This is what really bugged me about this case, because I don't know if they just didn't do their job how they should have, or if they did look for it, but they didn't find anything, and it just wasn't reported in any of the information that I found. So I don't know. But it kind of drives me nuts that I don't...
Well, no, and normally they would find or collect something. And the fact that they have nothing, that kind of says a lot, too.
Yeah, exactly. But what I was able to find was this. The apartment that she lived in, it did appear to have been ransacked, and investigators found a journal entry, and it read, quote, "Get tickets for AS," end quote. But other than that, nothing. Unfortunately, the case went cold after a few months, with no leads and no new evidence. It was becoming clear to detectives that they might never solve this case unless something changed. Fortunately for them, August brought a break in the case that investigators so desperately needed. However, just exactly what this break was pretty unbelievable to everyone. According to Ray Johnson from ChicagoNow.com, the detectives working Teresita's case were Detectives Joe Stachla and his partner, Detective Lee Eplin. One day in August, Detective Stachla received a note on his desk. It asked him to call the Evanston Police Department in regards to the Teresita Basa case. When he contacted them, they put him in touch with a man named Dr. Chua. When they spoke to Dr. Chua, he told them something that sounded quite unbelievable. Dr. Chua told them he thought that his wife was possessed by the spirit of Teresita. According to Morbidology.com, quote, he explained to the stunned officers that his wife had sporadically gone into a comatose state and would speak in the voice of another woman. At one point during these trances, Mrs. Chua blurted out, "I am Teresita Basa," end quote. As you can imagine, the detectives were quite stunned when they heard this, and didn't believe much of what was said, but Dr. Chua was expecting this. He told the detectives he felt the same way, until he started asking his wife questions. Dr. Chua wanted to get proof from the spirit. He explained that while his wife was possessed by the spirit, It told him she was murdered and needed help solving the murder. Then she said the name of her killer, Alan 𝒉𝒒. The spirit stated she had been stabbed to death by the man. There are some sources that state Dr. Chua asked why Teresita let Alan in her home, and she replied, quote, because he was a friend, end quote. Which, Mary, when I read that just broke my heart. Like, you think you're letting a friend come over to, to hang out, and, oh, God, it's just heartbreaking. Her spirit also says something that not even the police know about. She tells Dr. Chua that Alan stole her jewelry. Eventually, Dr. and Mrs. Chua decided to inform the authorities about what happened to them. They went back and forth with the decision for a while because they didn't want to, quote, appear foolish, end quote. However, when Basa's spirit returned, they quickly changed their minds. The detectives apprehended Alan's address, and then they went to go pay him a visit on August 11th. He confessed that he knew Basa, but denied going to her apartment. And then for whatever reason, he ended up changing his story. And he said that he did go to her apartment, but only to fix her TV, and then he left. However, while they were questioning Alan, detectives noticed his girlfriend wearing jewelry that was very similar to Basa's. They confronted him with the evidence, and he ended up confessing to her murder and to the robbery.
See, that's what gets me. Why lie about it if you're just gonna be like, yeah, you can't?
I mean, I think he probably thought he was gonna get away with it until the detective saw the jewelry. And then it was like, oh, well, now they know, But do you want to know why he robbed her?
Why?
This was his answer. So he could pay his rent. He stated that all he got was $30 and a handful of jewelry. I mean, I'm assuming he was expecting to get more money than that, but I'm assuming that's all he could find, or maybe that's all she had. And then he took some of her jewelry too, so. Or he is lying, and he didn't go there to rob her, he went there to kill her.
Yeah, I think the whole rent thing was the, easiest. Like, money and jewelry, I think that's the easiest sort of thing. Because obviously there's something more. You can't just, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There has to be more to it. That just sounds very vague. And after $30 and then he burns the whole place down, or an attempt to.
Yeah, he goes over. He already has it in his head that he's going to rob her, and for his rent, right? Or at least that's what he says. But then he does all this stuff. So he kills her. He puts a mattress over her. He takes off her clothes. He makes it look like she was raped. He folds her clothes up, which, by the way, I don't know why he did that, but weird. And then he sets her on fire. I'm sorry, but I don't think that just all happens immediately. I think that you have to think about this stuff beforehand. When the case went to trial, Alan suddenly changed his story, and he stated he was kidding when he confessed. That trial ended in a mistrial. A new hearing was scheduled for February of 1979. However, when Alan was taken back to his cell, he had a mysterious change of heart and confessed all over again to detectives and pled guilty to Basa's murder.
See, now that's interesting. From this guy and the way he acted, and all of a sudden that just changes. I wonder, did she, visit him? If people believe in that stuff. Yeah, I do. As do you, or?
Yeah, that is one of the theories. So some people do believe that Basa's spirit haunted him in his cell until he finally took responsibility for what he did. And other people believe he only pleaded guilty to get a more lenient sentence.
Ah, see, that makes sense.
Yeah. Whatever the case may be, though, he was finally charged and convicted of Teresita's murder. He was sentenced to 14 years for the murder, but, and this is very upsetting when I read this, he was released in 1983. He hadn't even served 5 years of his sentence.
Why? And it's always, people like that. Always with people like that.
Yeah, I know. But, it's, this case is so frustrating to me. It's all I think about is, if that was my daughter, or if that was my sister, or my mom, or, or one of my friends. It's, there's no justice in that. Oh, but to go back to your question about if I believe that she visited him, I think it's definitely a possibility. I mean, you and I, Mary, we both kind of believe in that stuff. We both are very spiritual, we're open-minded. And if you remember when we lived together, we did have a very interesting encounter with a spirit.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember this.
Was it the cat? Because I know there was 2 instances.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So we were both watching TV.
Oh, are we going to tell them? Okay, let's tell them.
Yeah, we can tell them. I know it kind of it veers off, but
okay.
We're sitting there watching TV. It was probably Friends, because you were always watching Friends, which...
Hey, or Supernatural.
No, but at the time, because I would get home around 10:30, and you'd be finishing up watching, like, Friends or something.
Okay.
And then we were watching Friends, or TV, and I see this thing in the corner near the door. It's just like a bouncing little figure. And I'm like, there's nothing there. You know, I'm just tired. I just got off a long shift. It's nothing. So, but I'm just watching TV. And I see you, Kim, kind of turn your head and look over.
Yep.
And then what'd you say? You're like, did you see that?
Yeah, I was like, did you see that? And you were like, well, what did you see? And then I was like, what did you see? And so we both kind of at the same time said what we saw, and it was the exact same thing.
But I mean, for the whole, his whole change of heart thing, I think, he either, like you were saying, to lessen the amount of time, or maybe she visited him.
Exactly. So I'm open to the idea of that happening. I'm not saying that is what happened, but I'm definitely open to the idea that she could have visited him.
So what happened to Alan? Are there any updates on him?
Well, I couldn't find much on this. The only information I found was from Ray Johnson from ChicagoNow.com. And what he said was this, quote, I believe that Showery is still alive and getting ready to reach the age of 70. It seems that after he was released, he rejoined a mysterious woman named Naomi, who attended his court hearings, and in the late 1980s moved in with a female relative in Colton, California. After that, he came back to live in Chicago for a short stint at 1901 West Pryor near Blue Island, and after that he returned to the area where he lived prior to the murder, which was New York City. I have been able to trace Showery back to New York up until 2004, but after that it is somewhat of a mystery, although there is reason to believe he is still alive and probably still haunted by the voice that convicted him in 1979, end quote. So, we know up until 2004, but that was a long time ago too, so, I mean, he could be dead right now for all we know.
But he still lived a very long life, though.
He did, yeah. Oh, and, but just to let the listeners know, Teresita's parents did take her body back to the Philippines, and that is where she is buried.
Oh, good. So she had some closure.
Yeah, she did. I'm glad her parents took her home. Well, that is all we have for the Teresita case, listeners. And after the break, we will tell you about the case of the Greenbrier ghost. Now back to the case.
Our second case is of the mysterious death of Elva Zona Hester Shue of Greenbrier County, Lewisburg, West Virginia. It was said that Zona, as she was commonly known as, may have died of a broken heart due to complications of a miscarriage, or, as local doctor and coroner Dr. Knapp had concluded, that she had died due to an everlasting faint, otherwise known as a heart attack. The death of Zona appeared to be natural, that is, until her spirit made contact with her mother. It was on January 23, 1897, that Zona Hester Shue was found dead at the bottom of the stairs by Andy Jones, an 11-year-old boy, who did chores around the house for her. Andy was sent to the Shue residence by Zona's husband, Erasmus Stribling Trout Shue, who was calling himself Edward at the time, but known as Trout to everyone else. Edward sent him that morning to see if he needed to pick up anything after work before coming home. In seeing the body, Andy rushed home to his mother where he alerted her to what he had seen, and then to the blacksmith's shop, where Edward was working. Quote, when told of the situation, 𝒂 appeared in great anguish, ran to his home, gathered his dead wife into his arms, and directed local doctor and coroner Dr. George W. Knapp to be called. End quote. And here's the strange bit. Edward had visited the boy 3 to 4 times that morning to see if he could go check on his wife and to see if any chores needed to be done.
3 to 4 times? That's weird.
It's a little excessive and sketchy.
Very sketchy.
And then you hear about the part of him gathering up his wife. You think, was he by her side grieving? But no. He actually went so far as to move the body upstairs, laid her out on the bed, cleaned and redressed the body, which is something that wasn't done at the time, as it was done by women in the community and after inquest or autopsy. In fact, he redressed her in a high-collar burgundy dress, the very one she got married in. She also had a scarf around her neck, as he claimed it had been her favorite, and a sort of veil to cover her face.
That sounds very sketchy to me, like he's trying to hide something.
Exactly. I mean, who moves a body, much less cleans and redresses them? That's not normal. Forget normal, you just don't do that.
Yeah, that's weird.
As the body was examined, Edward was right there with Dr. Knapp, quote, cradling her head and becoming agitated when Knapp got too close to Zona's head and neck, end quote. There was a slight discoloration on the right side of her neck and cheek, but the doctor didn't further examine as Edward got distraught about it. Dr. Knapp then ruled Zona's cause of death as everlasting faint, only for it to be changed to complications from pregnancy. It's noted that weeks prior to her death, Dr. Knapp had been treating Zona, quote, for what he described as female trouble, so he assumed the death was related, end quote.
So, wait, I'm a little confused. Was she actually pregnant? And what is the female trouble he was referring to?
There was speculation that she may have been, but nothing was for certain. I mean, there's no actual detail in saying that she was or wasn't. But as for female trouble, they just mean in terms of childbirth. Zona was laid to rest in her childhood home on January 24th. The erratic and overt alertness by Edward wasn't missed by Zona's mother, Mary Jane Hester. During the wake and funeral, she noticed Edward acted attentively toward the body, a little more than one would. More specifically, to the head and neck, which she found suspicious. For example, he put pillows on either side to stabilize her head and said he wanted her to be comfortable and wouldn't allow anyone to visit the open casket of his wife. Everyone passed it off as grief. A month after the burial of Zona, Mary had woken up one night to the sight of her daughter in her room. She attempted to reach out and touch her, to make sure she was actually there, but she disappeared. Her daughter had visited her for 4 consecutive nights, and told her mother what had led to her death. Mary had spoken with neighbors of the dreams she had, but no one really paid any mind to the stories she told them, and was dismissed as sad delusions of a grieving mother. The same went with authorities. The only person that found the dream to be a possibility was Mary's brother-in-law. Together they brought the story to the attention of prosecuting attorney, John A. Preston, who helped further the investigation. Remember that feeling that Zona's mother had about Edward? Turns out her gut feeling was right. As further research was done on Edward 𝒂, it turns out Mary had every right to think the way she did about her son-in-law. She never liked him before, and didn't approve of the marriage, but this information she later found helped solidify what she already thought. Quote, an investigation into 𝒂's background revealed that he had served a term in the penitentiary, and had been married twice previously, and both wives had died under strange circumstances. One wife was supposed to have died from a broken neck when she fell from a haystack. The other wife died while helping 𝒂 repair a chimney. He was on the top of the chimney, and his wife was placing bricks in a basket with a rope attached to it, and as the basket was drawn up, the basket turned and dropped the bricks onto the head of his wife. End quote. After the conversation between the Hesters and Preston, Preston had questioned Dr. Knapp about his findings surrounding the death of Zona, and whether another autopsy would be warranted. Quote, both men agreed an autopsy would prove whether or not Mrs. Hester's strange story was true. If it was not, the examination would at least serve to relieve the aching heart of a saddened mother and throw undue suspicion from the shoulders of 𝒂. End quote. In going through with the autopsy, they informed Edward and ordered that he accompany them to the grave and the post-mortem examination.
Did it say how Edward was acting when they told him that Zona was going to be exhumed?
Edward had protested the exhumation of the body, but went along with them regardless. He was nervous but still claimed his innocence. It's noted that he said, quote, "I don't know what in the name of God they're taking her up for. They're not going to find anything," end quote. But obviously we know how that turned out. At first, he really thought they wouldn't find anything and he'd get away with it.
Oh, really? So I'm assuming that they actually do find something then.
The examination was done on February 22nd, and after reviewing the body, they had noticed that due to the cold temperatures, it had kept the body well preserved. Ruling out any sort of poison, Dr. Knapp continued the exam for the next 3 days and nights, and finally came to the conclusion of what really happened to Zona. Reading from the report, quote, "The discovery was made that the neck was broken and the windpipe smashed. On the throat there were marks of fingers indicating that she had been choked. The neck was dislocated between the first and second vertebrae. The ligaments were torn and ruptured. The windpipe had been crushed at a point in front of the neck." End quote. Obvious murder by strangulation.
Yikes.
Shu was arrested and held in Lewisburg until his indictment by a grand jury and the trial in June. Many had testified, but the main person whose account outshined the rest was Mary Hester's. Quote, "Never before in the history of American courts had a jury been asked to convict a defendant on testimony which resulted from a dream." End quote. The dream itself isn't what solved the case, but it was the evidence that was brought about from the dream which resulted in the exhumation of Zona's body. Finally, on July 11th, Edward was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. However, he died on March 1st, 1900, only serving 3 years of his sentence. When I hear the lousy reason behind her death. This was taken straight from the transcript from the trial in which Mary Hester was questioned about how her daughter was killed, and she said, quote, "He came home that night from the shop and seemed angry. I told him supper was ready, and he began to chide me because I had prepared no meat. I replied there was plenty, bread and butter, applesauce, preserves, and other things that made a good supper. He flew into a rage, got up, and came towards me." End quote. He strangled her because there was no meat for dinner. Shu was already in a right mood when he got home, but the fact that Zona didn't cook the dinner he wanted...
That's crazy. To kill somebody because they didn't cook the right dinner that you wanted? I mean...
Dinner wasn't cooked right? There had to be something more.
Well, I was just going to say, in your research, did he ever give any reason why he killed her? It was just the dinner thing? Or did he... was there another woman?
No, it was just, it was never said as to the reasoning.
Okay.
Other than what was said in the dream from Zona to her mother Mary.
Okay, and she said it was about the dinner, as far as she knew. Well, I'm glad that I'm glad that justice was served for her. Unfortunately, he only served 3 years of his sentence because he ended up dying, but...
Oh, here's the bit on that. When he was in jail, there was a riot to get him so they can hang him. People in jail kind of revolted against him.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I thought, you should have just let him, but they broke it up, and then he died. I think they said the flu got to him.
Okay.
And that when he had passed, no one came to collect his body. No family members or anyone wanted to come and claim him.
Wow.
So that kind of says a lot then, too.
That does say a lot. And what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about her spirit going to her mother? Do you believe that?
I do. I believe that can happen. But see, that's the thing. Out of all the people to do something and speak up, she was the only one.
Yeah.
No one else in the community was like, that looks suspicious, or that sounds weird, or he, was acting a certain way. But the mom. So maybe the daughter knew for something to be done to have justice. Let me go to mom. And plus the mom's going to do that. She's going to protect her kids.
I was just going to say, that makes sense to me because really I think one of the only people someone can rely on is a parent. And I don't know, how I feel about my kids, I would do anything for them, and I would, if something, God forbid, ever happened to them, I would never stop trying to get justice or whatever it may be.
And rightfully so, yeah.
I think, appearing to her mother was the right thing to do. And even back in the time where you said that nobody believed the mom, right? Until the brother-in-law stepped in.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God
Yeah.
for the brother-in-law.
To this day, this 19th century case remains the only case of its kind where the American judicial system let the testimony of a ghost help convict their murderer. All right, Mystery Knox listeners, that's it for our case today. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, we love to hear your ideas and or theories on this case, so let us know on our Instagram and Facebook at Mystery Knox Podcast. On Twitter, at Mystery Knox Pod, or send us a voice message on anchor.fm/Mystery Knox Podcast. A list of our sources can be found on our blog at mysteryknoxpodcast.wordpress.com. Your support is always appreciated, so if you enjoyed what you've heard, please let us know by giving us a rating on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your podcast. We'll see you on our next episode, and remember, stay weird, stay curious.
Mischief managed.